This is my review of the Seismic Aeon trucks. I opted for the 105 millimeter version of the truck because I wanted to find out if it was possible that a 105 millimeter cast truck under $100 could actually perform like a modern race truck. For reference, here's another truck of similar size. This is the Rogue ZM1. It goes from 100 to 110 millimeters, and that size is kind of the new meta for high performance race trucks. And so when Seismic ambitiously re-released these trucks, because let me inform you, about 10 years ago, Seismic released this truck for the first time in 180 millimeters width. I knew I had to scoop it up and find out, for the sake of the review, if this truck was any good. So first and foremost, the unique thing I would say about this truck is that they use proprietary bushings. Now this is the roadside bushing, and as a matter of fact, the roadside and boardside bushings have different shapes. Here are the pink ones. I have a size chart behind me. I bought almost every durometer of these. These pink ones are 78A. The roadside bushing is a little bit smaller than the boardside bushing, and a key feature, other than being, you know, kind of triangular-ish, is that they have these slots in the back. This, like, I'll get out of the way so you can see on the contrast of the surface behind me. They have these slots in the back and are very specifically sized so that they fit into this kind of like cylindrical bore in the base plate, in the bushing seat. Theoretically, what that is supposed to do with this, like, kind of, you know, cylindrical cutout is help restrict the truck to, you know, that one axis of motion around the pivot, which is kind of what every manufacturer is really chasing, is just a clean, precise pivot around that central pivot axis defined by the pivot cup. Now, this is a really cool concept. I like the idea of changing the way we think about trucks, changing the way that we think about bushings, but it didn't catch on. It didn't catch on 10 years ago, and despite the updates, the smaller sizes, now I think they're offered in, of course, the original 180 millimeter, but also 155, 130, and 105, which is what these are. They kind of missed the mark, and it's hard to pinpoint why. First of all, to get to the bottom of this, I made a mock-up of the bushing seat. You can see how the shape of the bushing seat with the cylindrical bore is similar to this one. I just took calipers, took as many measurements as I can, and put this into my CAD software just so I could see, you know, how was this aligning. And let's mock it up here. Let's do it. So this is a little 3D printed thing, and you can see how the bushing is designed to fit around that central bore, and even without the walls of the bushing seat, can lock those bushings in place, therefore kind of locking the hanger in place is the idea. But the actual execution is a little sloppy. This is true of the trucks and of my model, so this is not some issue with my measurements. The bushing doesn't fully close around it. The bushing and the, like, negative of this kind of curvature here is a little too small. And the central cylindrical bore is a little too big. And that means that you've got this kind of slop here, which sucks. It means that the truck has very little center. And in order to overcome this, you have to squash the bushing down by tightening down the kingpin. And even still, there are little gaps that are going to be hard to show without doing anything super crazy. It leaves gaps even once it's squished down that suck, just plain and simple. It means that the bushing lacks center, but also because you've squished it down, and this bushing seat is, it's a pretty sharp lip in the bushing seat. Not only does the truck not have a lot of center, but it also bottoms out easily. So it doesn't lean very much. And the little bit of lean you have kind of on that center point doesn't result in a lot of steering, and is kind of just like vague, not fully engaging the bushing. And then you lean over even further, the steering starts to come in, but the truck also bottoms out quickly. It just doesn't feel good. A good feeling truck will kind of have a similar, to me at least, will have a very similar resistance through a large percentage of the lean, especially the center. So that's a big disappointment. And, maybe that can be changed with a new mold for the urethane bushings. Maybe if they fix the kind of central, diameter of that cylindrical bore, perhaps they can achieve a bushing kind of assembly here, a bushing hanger assembly that is able to lock down the truck a little bit better, lock down the slop, and have kind of a cleaner feeling when it turns. But until then, it just doesn't work well. Clearly something was overlooked in the design. Another just interesting feature, the bottom of the bushing, of the board side bushing, is keyed so that you can't install it wrong. Keyed just means that it has a special surface, a special geometry. That means it can only fit flush down here in a specific way. You can see how that kind of little lip comes up in there. That's fine. It makes sense if you're going to have a specially shaped bushing like that you would take a little bit of time just to make sure that riders can't install it improperly. But I think this has a really big negative result. Now, remember how I said the board side bushing is larger than the roadside bushing? Theoretically, that would mean that the board side bushing wants to compress less. In my experience, that's not actually true. And the reason I come to say that is because it feels like these trucks steer 5 degrees less than advertised. So stock, these trucks are 45 degrees and 30 degrees front and rear. Comes split. I think you can buy symmetrical as well. I'm a split stan. I think split riding is great and nice and easy, so I continue to do that, and I recommend that if you're going to buy some trucks. Buy split angles or use Pat's risers to wedge them to your desired angle. It's a really cheap way to modify your trucks. Where was I going with this? Yeah, so 45 degrees, 30 degrees. When I'm actually riding these trucks, the angles feel more like 40 degrees, 25 degrees. It feels like somewhere in the, compression of the bushings, the truck is actually able to lean too much. And what I think that's a result of is I think it's a result of this really thin step here from this keying, this special shaping that they did to make sure that it can only fit in the base plate. It just seems like the bushing collapses, letting the hanger sink down lower than it actually would be if it were leaning smoothly at, this is the 30 degree base plate. Instead of maintaining that 30 degree angle, it seems like the truck collapses as it leans over and results in less steering. So down to a, pseudo 25 degree angle. That also just feels bad. I did mess around with wedging. One really nice thing about these trucks is that they have an extremely low ride height for a cast truck. Definitely the lowest ride height I've seen on a cast truck. That means that these trucks are perfect candidates for wedging. I was using a 5 degree wedge in the front truck, and a 10-degree wedge in the rear truck. So +5 in the front to bring it up to 50 degrees, -10 in the back to bring it down to 20 degrees. And 50-20 is an angle split that I'm usually using on my racier setups. And I've begun free riding on kind of an approximately 50-20 setup with a lot of success on a very small wheelbase. These trucks, wedged to 50-20, still have the same issue where it feels like they steer less. Now, I was scratching my head trying to figure out how do I make these trucks feel better. When Seismic hit me up, they noticed on Instagram that I was posting some pics of these trucks, realizing that I was testing them. They let me know that I should try a split bushing setup. Now, I was already using a split bushing setup where I was using soft in the front, hard in the back. That's something you want to do if you're running split angles on any truck setup at all. The lower the angle is, the more leverage you inherently have over the bushings, the more mechanical leverage you get. And so you want to compensate for using a lower angle with using harder bushings. That's why on trucks like these ZM1s with a really low 20-degree rear truck, you have a 97A bushing, super hard. You almost can't even compress them by hand, paired with a 95A bushing, whereas the front truck at 55 degrees can use 73A, 78A. That huge disparity still results in a pretty similar feeling between the front and the back truck, a similar lean resistance because of that disparity and the leverage you get due to the angles. So I was using 94A in the rear truck with 78A in the front truck, and Seismic hit me up and they're like, hey, what are you doing? What are your bushing setups? Things like that. And I said, well, here you go. This is what I'm trying. They replied with, use a harder bushing board side. And in fact, they said use 2 duros harder in the board side than on the road side, at least in the front truck. So the recommendation they had was 8190, I think, in the front truck, which would be yellow and red. Instead of doing that, I did 7886, which is orange and pink. Orange one is just on the ground. So yeah, this orange in the front truck, board side with the softer one road side, and that actually really improved the kind of steering qualities of the truck. Because this roadside bushing is so much softer, it actually wants to compress more. It's much easier for the hanger to compress than the board side bushing, and therefore actually maintains the steering angle a little bit better. Did it fully fix the problem? I don't think so. I thought it fixed the problem, and then I realized that the board I was riding naturally adds a little bit of steering to the trucks. It adds about +3 degrees to both the front and the rear truck. So instead of riding 50-20 like I thought I was riding, I was actually riding 53-23. So, you know, if you're setting up these trucks, that's probably my recommendation, is to add more angle to the trucks than you would normally ride on other trucks, just to get an adequate steering out of them. And then use the split. That actually helps a lot. It doesn't solve all the issues with the trucks though. These trucks, when I slid them, experienced a whole lot of chatter, pretty unpredictable slides, and just a gross kind of kick out and hook up. I think that's, once again, because of this extra gap, this kind of, you know, imprecise fitment between the bushings and the hanger when it actually sits in there. It just felt like the hanger was not properly supported side to side and was just nasty. Lots of chatter with race wheels. You know, I'm skating these 105mm trucks. I'm not trying to free ride that. I did free ride it a bit. I used some yellow 80A Kevin Reimer Pro models from Powell Peralta, and I guess I was able to do some stand-ups on there, but even those wheels, very slidey wheels, were chattering a lot. And not like a high-pitched chatter of, you know, just the kind of chatter you'd get with a bad bearing or just a wheel that maybe has some unsupported lips. It was this really deep, rumbly, chunky chatter that usually is the thing that indicates to me that something in my truck setup is wrong. And of course, hunted it down, tried a bunch of different bushing combos, things like that. And it just stayed true that the slide feel on these trucks was overall just really bad. Now, I took a step back and tried to take into account the fact that, okay, well, I've been riding a lot of fancy precision trucks lately. Maybe this is average for a cast truck. Maybe this is normal. And maybe I just need to take a step back, try some cast trucks again, and compare other cast trucks to these cast trucks. Compare apples to apples. Maybe I'm just comparing apples to oranges, and this is actually pretty good, pretty on par for a cast truck. So a patron of mine and a good friend of mine, Brandon, sent me his bears. These are actually chopped down to 120 millimeters, down from 130. And I had a field day setting these up. As a matter of fact, the bushing setup that I settled on is the Canon Magnum combo from Riptide. And I split these trucks to 50 degrees front truck, 30 degrees rear truck. I didn't do any more in the rear truck because the ride height was already getting a little bit out of hand. Bears have a really, really tall ride height. But I set these up with the Canon Magnum and with the Pat's Risers inserts because I was using these Riptide products. They were not plug barrel bushings like in the Venoms or in a stock bear bushing. And so I used Pat's inserts so that I could use whatever bushings I want. And these were so good. They really performed well. Now, I haven't skated these enough to actually give you a full review on the bear trucks. But they really instantly and clearly outperformed the Seismic Aeon trucks. They were able to, corner better, put down more grip. They had better reliability in and out of slides. They felt like they could handle the force of sliding a little bit better. Once you're going sideways, once you're putting forces into the truck sideways instead of just the normal steering turning force, these held up great with the extra thick Magnum bushing board side and the Pat's Risers, thingies, inserts in there. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, Owen, that's not fair. You're using aftermarket bushings. You're using an aftermarket insert that wasn't originally designed for the truck. That you can't compare that to the stock bushings on the Seismic trucks. But actually, I think it's completely fair because you can't buy these in other brands. You can't buy other bushings or inserts or anything like that to modify these to make these trucks work better for you. And so I think it's completely fair that I spend a similar amount of money getting these trucks up to snuff, and I didn't spend money on these trucks. These are products I already had on hand. But the idea stands that a normal cast truck, you have so many bushing shapes, you have so many aftermarket options to tune up the truck to feel good for you, whereas the Seismic Aeon truck uses a proprietary bushing shape with a bushing formula that nobody knows about. What is this? Is it the same as their DEF CON bushings? That would be cool, but they don't advertise that this is like a DEF CON formula, so who knows what kind of run-of-the-mill bushing this is from whatever manufacturer. It seems like it wasn't worth their time to put their own name on it, put the DEF CON name on these bushings. And yeah, trucks that you can't modify apart from just buying more bushings from the manufacturer, which are already flawed and misshapen. So yeah, if my frustration is starting to come through, it's because this is just not a good product for our scene, right? It's not a good product to put out there. You're inventing something that has proprietary bushings that lock people in, discourage customization, and also just doesn't work well. I am a big fan of Seismic. I really like their products. I really like that they're constantly trying to innovate. They do a lot of proprietary stuff. They pay a lot of attention on their core design, their urethane design, their wheel design, and they sponsor some amazing riders, some of my favorite riders in the world, racers, free riders, everything like that. And it's extremely telling when they have this great lineup of riders, people all over the planet, and they can only get one person on their team to actually skate these trucks consistently. Yeah, so Seismic Aeon trucks are not worth it. I spent probably over $100 on the trucks and all the different bushings to actually get these, set up to make sure that I gave these trucks a fair chance at being tuned properly. Oh, by the way, Riptide sent me pivot cups for these trucks, and they did improve the trucks a little bit. The stock pivots in these trucks are garbage. So the Riptide pivots did make a good little improvement, but they did not surmount kind of all the other issues that I had with these trucks. They only made them turn a little bit better and locked in the slop a little bit. The stock pivots on these trucks are undersized. They're like over machined. They're just too sloppy, and that definitely contributes to some of the bad chatter and just the bad feeling in general I experience with these trucks. I don't have much more else to say about these trucks other than, the axles are wide enough that you can throw on some speed rings or axle spacers if you have them. I only had them because I already own other precision trucks that I could just borrow them from. And you can comfortably space these trucks out an extra 6 millimeters. So when I was free riding them, I had them spaced out to like 111 millimeters. When I was doing race mode, they were down at 105. It's an interesting little thing. Who can say if it was on purpose or not, but they're not providing any spacers from the factory, so it is what it is. Yeah. Kind of a big disappointment. And now that you're here at the end of my video, you can hear my conspiracy theory, which is not my conspiracy theory. A friend of mine shared this theory with me, and I just thought it was genius, but I won't throw them under the bus. Take it with a grain of salt. It might not be true, but these trucks were invented 10 years ago and basically sold like crap. Basically did not sell. And so they have all this old stock of these trucks just sitting around, not selling, on their website, doing nothing. And they say, well, the craze these days is these narrow trucks, right? Everybody wants trucks with smaller and smaller hangers, 150, 130, 100, whatever. Let's take all of our old stock as an effort to try to sell this old product. Send it to a machine shop, chop up the old stock to be narrower. Any of the marks and mars and crap that happens in the machining process, let's paint that over with a fresh black coat of paint or whatever this is on it, and let's resell it under, the old thing. And our new selling point is no longer the geometry and stuff like that. The new selling point is, hey, look, we're the only trucks on the market that are this narrow and are offering a 45-degree and a 30-degree angle. Extremely compelling, and I think it's genius, actually. I really just wish they executed it better by putting good pivot cups in there, pivot cups that actually, aren't sloppy, actually help define that pivot axis a little better, casting good bushings that actually fit the hangers as they're designed, and maybe using better urethane in the bushings or fixing the geometry of the board side bushing so that it doesn't collapse over and make the trucks literally lose angle as they steer. It feels bad. It feels really bad. I don't like to be critical of, I will be critical. And I like putting longboard gear under a microscope like this, where we kind of really break it down and just objectively tackle it. And I love Seismic as a brand, so it really kills me to give these such a downvote, to really, put them down and say these trucks are not worth it. They should not have been made, should not be sold, and should not be purchased. Because, if you're looking at these trucks and you're like, but I need a 100-millimeter truck to get rail match. I need, a truck this small with these angles in order to make my setup come together and be complete as in the way that I envision it. And these, 105-millimeter Aeons are the only way I can achieve that. And this is my advice, there is so much more that goes into a good performing setup and a good performing truck than simply how wide your truck is. Rail match, which I'm not going to get into it right now, rail match is a lie. Rail match is not real. There are qualities about rail matching that have some truth to it, but they are truths about a larger fact about how narrowing your trucks or widening your trucks changes the dynamics of a board more than simply do the edges of my wheels line up with the edges of my board. I personally would much rather skate 150 millimeter, 165 millimeter, even 180 millimeter Paris V3 trucks with Pat's risers inserts in them and a proper Cannon Magnum riptide bushing setup. And I will outskate these trucks with a perfect rail match any day of the week. A well-tuned truck, even if those wheels stick out super far or whatever, a well-tuned truck will outperform a badly engineered truck that rail matches any day of the week. So if that's your like last leg that you're standing on for like why you think you need to pick these trucks up is, well, it's the only way I can make my Magnums fit underneath the edges of my 8.5 inch board, I'm sorry to say, you're better off getting 130 mil Bears, 150 mil Paris, or hell, even 9-inch calibers. It's insane to say, I get it. That's a lot of wheel poking out the edge of your board, but better off doing that and buying good bushings, buying good components, replacing the pivot cups, and making that truck tuned, precise, feel good for your style of skating, using wedges to mess with the angles in a way that's going to work with the way that you like to steer and corner and slide and things like that. Do all of those things, ignore rail match, and you're going to have a much better feeling board than anybody who has bought these trucks just so that their mags fit under their board. That's all I've got to say. Thank you so much to the patrons that continue to support this channel. A lot of this stuff is only possible because of them. I bought these trucks, the Seismic Aeon trucks, not with Patreon money. This was Owen Campbell buying trucks that I was interested in and knew that I needed to review them and actually share with YouTube. Is it possible that a tiny cast truck like this with some race split angles is actually good enough to keep up with anything else? And here it is, the result for you. So thank you so much for watching. Check out the Patreon if you are interested in more content from me, more regular content. I've got a ton of hours of stuff over on Patreon, and the rewards are pretty fun if you want to throw me a couple more bones. Just go read through that. If you want to tune up your setup for cheap, I talk about them a lot. They sponsor me, but also it's a great company providing just awesome equipment, is Pat's Risers. Check out Pat's Risers to tune up your board on the cheap, make your cast trucks feel almost like precision trucks. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.